Stop. What's the password? Cruise news? Did you say cruise news? Wow, you actually got it right. I figured you'd get it wrong and end up in cruise purgatory, like our friends over there, Australia and New Zealand. Huh, interesting. Okay then, well, get in there. Let's get your cruise news. Well, hey, welcome to the Midships channel. I'm Corey, and I'll be serving up yet another sweet slice of that cruise news today. Now, in today's episode, we have a major U.S. cruise line CEO flipping the bird to the U.S. CDC. Plus, yet another cruise line says niet to cruising to Russia. And just like Royal Caribbean before them, Carnival Cruise Line is now rolling out a cruise support program for those impacted by the conflict in Ukraine. But we're going to get started today by looking at the 2022 Alaska cruise season, which has once again found itself in jeopardy. Let's flesh things out a bit with a snippet from TravelPulse.com by Bruce Parkinson. New Canadian guidelines put Alaska cruise season at risk again. New guidelines for the restart of cruising in Canada require that all passengers and crew members be fully vaccinated, which is a potential obstacle to the 2022 cruise season. A spokesperson for Transport Canada says as we look into the next year, Transport Canada remains focused on keeping Canadians safe. We also value the cruise industry and the economic contribution it makes to Canada. Canada's guidelines are tougher than those developed by the US CDC, which are being followed by most cruise lines. Here in the US, the CDC considers ships with 95% of passengers and crew on board having received a full round of initial approved vaccine to be highly vaccinated, while ships with 95% of passengers and crew receiving the vaccine plus their booster shot are being deemed to be the standard of excellence. But Canada's recently announced guidelines come with an even higher standard and apply to ships departing from US ports. So for a little better look at this, we're going to check out how Carnival Cruise Line is reacting to the news coming out of Canada. This comes, of course, from cruisehive.com by Melissa Mayntz. The difficulty in planning the 2022 Alaska season is due to the new COVID restrictions put in place by the Canadian government, as details have yet to be released about what testing, vaccination, or other protocols the Canadian government might require. While most port of calls around the world, they've already begun relaxing travel restrictions to encourage more passengers, Canada, however, they're yet to provide even the basic health and safety guidelines for visiting cruise ships, as the season draws pretty near. So this might have you asking yourself, what if Canadian restrictions don't match up to those put in place by the US CDC? If Canada introduces stricter requirements for travelers, it's possible that ports of call may need to be adjusted and Alaska cruise itineraries could very well change. In a post to his Facebook page, Carnival's brand ambassador John Heald said the following: "If it can't be worked out promptly, the cruise industry will seek to have government regulations suspended, just like what took place last year, and our itineraries, they'll bypass Canada once again, altogether." And it's important to note that congressional representatives from Alaska here in the US, including Senator Lisa Murkowski, they've already introduced legislation to extend the Alaska Tourism Restoration Act, which is the law passed back in 2021 that for 1 year permitted cruise ships to bypass Canada and head straight to Alaska. Another option might be that cruise lines who sail extensively in Alaska could just create different health and safety protocols that would apply only to Alaska sailings. Booked passengers will undoubtedly be contacted as soon as possible with updated requirements if that's the plan. But regardless of whatever happens up in Alaska, we here at the Midships channel will be keeping an eye out for you. Now it's time to turn our attention to a major cruise CEO that essentially flipped the bird to the US CDC. But before we do that, I do need to remind you all the articles referenced in today's episode, they're linked in the description below this video. While you're down there at the very top of my description box, there's a link to join the Midships group cruise. If you'd like to sail along with me down to the Caribbean this October, all you have to do is follow that link to get more information out of my Facebook group. It's free to join, you don't even have to book. Just take a look. Also down there in the description box, there's a link to the Midships Instagram page. That's where I post all the content that you don't see here on the main YouTube channel. And last but not least, I want to draw your attention down there to my Amazon Influencers store. It's open 24 hours a day, All the items in there ship with Amazon Prime, and the best part is just clicking on those links, well, it does help support this channel and help keep me cruising. Thank you so very much. Now, let's take our attention and turn it to Norwegian Cruise Line CEO Frank Del Rio. From cruiseradio.net by Richard Sims. Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings CEO Frank Del Rio is not mincing words when it comes to his stance on the CDC in general, and particularly the agency's latest guidelines. During a recent earnings call with investors, Del Rio admitted he's been very vocal throughout the pandemic as to the disappointment that we've all suffered at the hands of the CDC. They didn't shut down any other industry for nearly 19 months, only cruising, Del Rio lamented, and the CDC continues to have policies towards us that are not seen anywhere else in the travel industry. But we're making progress with them. Frank Del Rio, very vocal? You don't say. Well, as many of you out there know, and several of you, well, didn't appreciate at the time, I came down a little bit hard on Frank Del Rio at the beginning of the cruise resumption because, for me personally, I didn't think it's a cruise line CEO's business to be spouting off medical advice for public consumption. Call me old-fashioned, but to me, the CEO of a cruise line, they're no medical expert. Okay, I'm rambling. Let's find out more about what Del Rio is on about this time. Earlier this year, the CDC announced a new program that they asked cruise lines to voluntarily join. While Norwegian did so, and they were like the first cruise line to do it, Del Rio admits it wasn't an easy decision to opt in. That said, Frank believes that the relationship between cruise lines and the CDC is improving. Recent moves, he said, gave the industry hope that things are moving towards where we need to go. Ultimately, he pointed out that Norwegian brands have always exceeded whatever the CDC guidelines are. Frank says, "I don't need the CDC to tell me how to operate a cruise line safely. Our protocols have always exceeded theirs and will continue to do so at the end of the day. We need to build consumer confidence, and I think we're doing that," said Frank. So as usual, the often headstrong Frank Del Rio is taking yet another firm public stance when nobody asked him to do it. Do you agree with Frank? Maybe I'm totally out of touch, and I'm the one who needs to reevaluate things. Go ahead and let me know down below in the comments section. I'm kind of curious. Now, we need to look at yet another cruise line saying niet to cruising to Russia. From Cruise Industry News, MSC Cruises today announced that they're suspending port calls to St. Petersburg, Russia, due to recent developments in the region and related security concerns. The company says the health and safety of their passengers and crew remain their top priority, and that from the end of May until October, its 4 ships in the Baltic Sea will also suspend their calls to the Russian city. So the fallout from this conflict over Ukraine continues, and it's not the only news about it today, because Carnival Cruise Line, well, they're finally doing something to help support their crew members being impacted by the fighting. From cruisehive.com by Melissa Mayntz. Carnival Cruise Line is offering a variety of support measures to their crew members who are impacted by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Cruise lines are unique working environments, and the Carnival family is coming together to support their family members with connections to either Ukraine or Russia. In a letter sent out to guests on board their ships, Carnival Cruise Line has committed that they're providing support to crew members from both Ukraine and Russia. While the letter does not detail how many crew members hail from each country or what the cruise line is doing precisely, there are more than 120 countries represented across Carnival's fleet. Measures that Carnival's taken in the past include offering facilitated email, phone communications back home, arranging safe travel plans for crew members, or providing counseling and support for those on board. It's likely that similar measures are now being offered for both Ukrainian and Russian crew members. And don't forget, when you're sailing on your next cruise, go ahead and take a look at those crew member name tags. See if you can find anyone from on board the ship that's either from Russia or Ukraine. It's important to remember you can always show a little extra support and care for somebody from those regions on the ships in the form of just a nice conversation, maybe extra gratuities, or simply mentioning their name on your post-cruise survey. It really does go a long way. If you made it this far into today's episode, why haven't you subscribed to the channel yet? I put out new cruise content every single day that you can use if you have an upcoming cruise. Thanks so much for stopping by the channel today, and until tomorrow, we'll see ya on the Midships. La